But Senator, you're very welcome to be here. Thank you very much. And I believe you've got some opening remarks for us.
Very happy to be here. Oxford Union, such an old organization. We here in America don't have things that are really old. You have lots of things that are old, and the traditions of the Oxford Union is significant, and I feel honored to be able to spend some time with you. And also, I would mention to you, President Price, I think that your becoming president is the making of a good novel. Someone could write a novel about that, and I think it would do very well. That's my suggestion. So today I want a free exchange of ideas. You can ask me anything that you want to, and I will respond as I need to. So thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this program.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. We're welcome to have you. I'm not sure who would read that book about my life, but maybe I'll try and earn it with some good works in the next couple of years. I don't think there's any way of getting around the fact that the first thing we perhaps may need to talk about is the very distressing scenes at the US Capitol very recently. It was hard enough to watch what was happening and upsetting enough across the pond here. But for someone like you who's worked both sides of that building, but also when you were in law school, you were, I believe, a US Capitol police officer. What was running through your mind when you saw those distressing scenes?
My first tour of duty in Washington was as a police officer. Carried a gun, did directed traffic and crowd control, did those kinds of things. And I got to know the Capitol very well. I worked in the House side, the Senate side, the Capitol. So when I was elected to the House of Representatives, I knew the Capitol very well. And that is a step ahead of everybody else because it's such a huge, huge complex. So that occurrence that took place in the Capitol was very troubling to me. As I've indicated, my first job in Washington was as a policeman. And when I was elected to the Senate, I was the caretaker of the Capitol Police. They knew that I had served as a Capitol policeman, so I was the one that made sure that they were funded properly, that when we had to make any changes with the sergeant arms or the chief of police, I worked on that. So it was a job that I was well, that's what job I did because of my past experience. And the reason that was so troubling to me, the invasion of the Capitol, first time since British invaded the Capitol right after 1800.
Sorry about that, by the way.
Well, it didn't last too long, so we're okay. But I was terribly troubled because not only was I the person that was the caretaker of the Capitol Police, but when I became leader, I had lots of threats on my life. So for a number of years, the Capitol Police were with me 24 hours a day, 24 hours a day. So I have strong positive feelings about the Capitol Police. And I was terribly embarrassed that the world looked at the Capitol being invaded. It's not going to happen again. It's too bad that it did happen then. But as we know, the so-called insurrection was engineered by President Trump with those words, "I'm going to the Capitol, come down with me." And the rest is history, but it's not good history. And it's going to take some time for us to cleanse ourselves from that troubling time.
On the very specifics of it, do you think from all that experience that you've got that it was just bad luck that people were able to get in, or do you think there was some active malice in the part of some bit of the executive branch going up to the president himself that meant that there wasn't very much security there? And we've all seen there's now the billeting of National Guard troops, thousands and thousands of them, sitting on the floor in the Capitol building now, so that the manpower is clearly there. But was it just incompetence, or was it something darker that on the specific?
Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer have fired both the Sergeant Arms in the House and in the Senate, and rightfully so. They were terribly unprepared. There was lots of intelligence that something was going to happen, that these people were coming to the Capitol, and they were underprepared, and it was sheer negligence. And I think that firing the two sergeant arms was the right thing to do. We need to start over, because the Capitol Police is not, it was a spectacle that the world watched. They shouldn't have had to watch. And I'm terribly, terribly disappointed in not being prepared for something that was obviously going to happen.
And do you think that, just again on these sorts of specifics, the fact that the president didn't seem to act on anything, and that eventually when reinforcements were called in, it seemed to be at the behest of the vice president, is there anything to some of these questions that Mike Pence was the person who called these people in the end? And what does that say about the running of the executive at the moment?
One of the good things that's happened the last few weeks is that Mike Pence has drifted away from the president. He was a lapdog for the president for 4 years. And it came to a time when Trump was asking him to do the impossible, that is, not confirm the election of Joe Biden. And he couldn't go that far. And thank goodness for our country that he had the audacity, the courage to stand up against Trump. I think in the long run, it's going to help Mike Pence. Short term, all the Trump people are mad at him. They want to hang Pence and such vicious terminology that it's unbecoming to a civilized nation. But I think, I repeat, in the long run, it's going to help Mike Pence, because he finally showed that he could break away from the umbrella of Donald Trump.
And speaking of breaking away from that umbrella, is the case for the entirety of the GOP? Or is there a battle for the soul of the grand old party, with Senators Hawley and Cruz perhaps trying to take up some of the mantle and some of the maybe populist energies that have been unleashed versus others?
I believe one of the strengths of America has been its two-party system. It has been strong. I believe in a two-party system. I'm a staunch Democrat, but I think that we got along really well when we had two strong parties. However, the GOP's brand has been tremendously tarnished by Donald Trump. It has become the Donald Trump party, not the Republican Party. And it's going to have to be cleansed. And thankfully for the Republican Party generally, people are breaking away from Donald Trump. Not fast enough, but some people who followed him lock, stock, and barrel are in for big surprises. Hawley and from Missouri, and Cruz from Texas, they're in big trouble because they were the leaders of something that was illegal. That is, they led the charge to make illegal the legal election of Joe Biden. And so I think that the Republican Party is in big trouble. It's going to have to it'll take some time for it to be the grand old party it used to be rather than the Trump party.
And that kind of confrontation doesn't sound like a very fun one to be had, but you seem fairly confident from what you've just said there, that the forces, if not of good as a Democrat, but of less bad inside that party will win out. But is that going to be a very quick sort of process, or are we in for a lot of rancor and almost a sort of civil war inside the Republican Party?
I think there's going to be a lot of dissension within the Republican Party. What has happened that has been good is Donald Trump has been hit really hard. His popularity is now at all-time lows. It's in the 30s. When at one time, not in the distant past, he was in well over 50% approval rating. Not anymore. Donald Trump has been hurt, and in the process, it has helped, in my opinion, long-term the Republican Party. As long as the Republican Party is the Donald Trump party, it is bad for our country. It's bad for the world. What he has done as a leader of the United States and as leader of the Republican Party has been bad, not only for America, but for the world. And Joe Biden, some of the things he's going to do immediately, his first day in office, is rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, rejoin the World Health Organization, and in effect, establish America as part of the diplomatic core of the world.
And those, of course, are the things that that President-elect Biden is able to do quite quickly. But with a tied Senate, and I don't even know if you could call your successor, Chuck Schumer, a Senate majority leader if it's at 50-50, other than the vice president-elect's vote to break that tie. How much headway will he actually be able to make in healing some of the divisions that you've talked about now and in recent days?
I look at this as the glass being half full, not half empty. Why do I say that? We were very fortunate. Those 2 seats in Georgia, we won 2 seats in Georgia, an African-American and a Jew. The youngest member of the United States Senate is Ossoff from Georgia. We have Warnock, who is led the church that was led for many years with Dr. Martin Luther King's dad, and then by Dr. King. So I think that I feel really good about the fact that the Republican Party is going to be able to rebound. I think that it's not going to happen overnight. There's going to be some infighting within the Republican Party. But I repeat, I believe in a strong 2-party system. All due respect to Great Britain and most parliamentary governments, they have multi-party unity governments, which just creates lots of trouble. We have been fortunate not having to do that.
You say that, but by and large in Britain, for example, we've had majority governments. There have been a few cases of coalitions and things. Of course, on the continent, you get all kinds of deal makings that go on into forming the government. But those deals have to go on in the United States as well. And you will know this better than almost anybody, the kinds of efforts it goes into making these sorts of bipartisan deals on the Senate floor and all the sort of chicanery around procedure and all those sorts of things. Does it not, by having
But it makes it much easier when you're only dealing with 2 parties.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But you still find that you have people such as, I don't know, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and in the same party as perhaps more moderate figures. And again, you have people quite out there on the right of the Republican Party, in with someone like maybe Mitt Romney, who was perhaps once upon a time considered quite far on the right and is now considered, I suppose, almost a centrist by comparison. Is that not?
Well, during the time that I was during the time I was majority leader, I had to deal with Bernie Sanders, the most liberal person in the United States Senate. And frankly, Bernie was good for the caucus. It made it easier for us to have a middle ground because he was on one side, and then we had Joe Manchin from West Virginia on the other side. So I agree with you that there's a lot of manipulation goes on to create leadership in the United States Senate, but we're able to do that. And I also say this, the fact that it's 50-50, that is good news. What if we'd lost 1 seat in Georgia? Then the leader would be Mitch McConnell. And now the leader is Chuck Schumer. The reason that's important is all the committees, every one of them, judiciary, foreign relations, health and human services, all of them will be led by Democrats, every one of them. All the hearings will be led by Democrats. There will be no rump hearings held by Republicans because it's against the rules. So it is really good that it's 50-50. I repeat, sure a lot better than 49-51 with McConnell the leader. So I think that I was there when we had a 50-50 Senate. And I was very fortunate that I was able to work something out with Senator from Vermont, Jeffords. I went to him and said, look, I'm chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee. I've got a staff of 18. I got a beautiful suite of offices. I'll make you a deal. I will let you have my chairmanship. You can have my staff. You can have my suite of offices. You switch parties. And he did that. And so it became 51 for the Democrats, 49 for the Republicans. So 50-50, I've been there. It makes it difficult, but it's sure a lot better than 49-51.
Was it LBJ who said the first rule of politics is learn how to count? Yeah.
Say that again.
The first rule of politics, as LBJ said, was learn how to count. when you're talking about the votes.
Yes, that's, yeah.
You mentioned Mitch McConnell there, and in some of my research for this interview, I was trying to get inside both his head as well as yours, and the sort of, would you call it a rivalry between the pair of you over the last sort of 15 years or so? Could you explain what the personal relationship is like to start
Mitch
with?
and I have been in the Senate together for decades. We were whips together. We were leaders of our parties at the same time. So I have a warm relationship with Mitch McConnell. But that does not take away the fact that I can criticize him, because I have some criticism to make. I think that Mitch has done a great deal the last several years to really denigrate the Senate. The Senate has turned into nothing more than a manufacturing site for the approval of judges. They don't hold here, they don't have votes, they don't do amendments, they really do nothing but approve judges. The Senate has become a mere shadow of its former self. And that's why I've written op-eds for various newspapers, including the New York Times, saying that the filibuster has to go. For those in Great Britain who may not understand that, let me just give a brief outlook of what that is. In the United States, a rule was developed in the early 1900s that they would have what they called a cloture vote. That is, they could stop people from talking. And originally it took 67 votes of senators, 2/3, to take that, and then we dropped it to 60. Right now, it is 60 to stop a filibuster. Problem with that is that you can't have a democracy where it takes 60% of the vote on everything. And McConnell has made it so that 60 is the vote it takes to get everything done. And that will not last. And that's why I have said it's not a question if a filibuster is going to go away. It's a question when it's going to go away. Is it going to go away this Congress or next Congress? I think I've said that Joe Biden should have a little time as the new president to see if McConnell's willing to do some business and not require 60 votes on everything. But he shouldn't wait very long, because with a simple majority vote, you can change that. And I think that's something that ultimately will happen. The filibuster is on its way out.
And would you say it was fair that you involved in starting some of that process when the filibuster on various points was removed before, when you were up against McConnell and some of his attempts to delay and obfuscate things? And you've said before you don't regret anything about that. Did you mind telling some of our members what happened?
Yeah. Obama was president. He was very popular. But the Republicans were filibustering everything. They were filibustering even Secretary of Defense for the first time in the history of the country. And he was a Republican senator from Nebraska, Chuck Hagel. So they were filibustering everything. We couldn't get his nominations approved. We couldn't get of his cabinet officers. We couldn't get sub-cabinet officers approved. They disliked organized labor, but they couldn't attack it directly, so they did indirectly. So we couldn't get a simple majority, a quorum, for the National Labor Relations Board. The DC Circuit, the second most important court in the country, second only to the Supreme Court, we had 5 or 6 vacancies, couldn't get those filled. So to make Obama's presidency meaningful, I moved to change the rules. Now, I'm not the first one who had done it, but it hadn't been done in a while. And what the change I made is that to get a federal judge approved, it would take a simple majority, Supreme Court supermajority. And we were able, of course, to move on as a result of that change to get Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act done, the most significant reform of Wall Street in the history of the country with the Dodd-Frank bill. We did Lilly Ledbetter to put women on a more equal footing for pay with men. We did lots of really good stuff, and we did it as a result of changing those rules. Looking back, am I glad I did it? Yes, because Obama's first term, his first Congress, will go down as one of the most successful, if not the most successful Congress in the history of the country for a president. He probably got more done than Franklin Roosevelt during his first term.
I suppose that's definitely a legacy to be proud of. Do you think that some of that it being done largely along party lines led down a sort of more dangerous route afterwards, where some of those party lines have been more entrenched. Is that something that's come about in the Senate in the way that it's changed, or is that just sort of a Republican talking point, perhaps?
Well, we have seen tribal politics develop during the Republican leadership of the Senate, and it's really been too bad. In years past, Democrats and Republicans understood that legislation is the art of compromise. If you can't get things done unless you understand that legislation means you don't get what you want. You have to work out deals and compromises. And so, but that became unattractive, I guess, to the Republicans, and we haven't been able to get much done. But the basic framework of the Senate is still intact. And I think that a little bit of time will get rid of our tribal politics.
And you think that that's because Joe Biden is the person to do that? I know you have a long friendship going back with him. But given all of the rancor and the difficulties on both sides, even before Donald Trump came along, I think that some of the calls about the legitimacy of Trump's first win against Hillary Clinton, with the ideas that Russia got too involved in it, or I mean, even in your own history of talking about Mitt Romney's tax returns and things like that. Are there mistakes that you think that you've had in the past, either you personally or the Democrats, that's led down this road as well, or is that a false equivalency?
Well, you go back to the history of our country, and what took place during the many years I was in the Senate is always taking place in Congress of the United States. As you know, we had battles during the time when we had slavery, where a Massachusetts senator was against slavery. A man came over from the House of Representatives and beat him unconscious with a cane, and he wasn't able to come back to work for 5 years. So we've had little scuffles in the Senate in the past. Issues become complex, become very emotional, but they're rare. They have existed, and they will exist in the future. We just have to make sure that we get back to where we're doing some legislating with being able to compromise. And we have to see how Joe Biden will do that. Now, Joe Biden is a very, very effective person. I have such great admiration for him, not only from the fact I served with him for many decades in the Senate. Joe Biden always says to me every time we meet, he said, "You understand, I'm a Senate guy. I, Joe Biden, I'm a Senate guy." So he's proud of the fact of his long time in the Senate, but also he's unique in the fact that he spent 8 years as Vice President of the United States. So he's got it all. And he is a person who is so, lack of a better description, nice. He's good to everybody. He's just as a nice human being. He has been through the trials of life. He was in the Senate for a matter of weeks, and his wife and daughter are killed in a car crash going back to Wilmington, Delaware. His 2 boys are hurt very badly. So from that day forward, he and his sister Valerie raised those 2 boys. He's a man who, as a young man, had really a bad speech impediment. He stammered very badly. He worked hard to try to overcome that. In the mirror, he would work and practice and practice. And people, of course, made fun of him, especially when he was a teenager. And he had a nickname called Shoe Leather. Why was he called Shoe Leather? Because he was as tough as shoe leather. He got in a lot of fights trying to protect the fact that people shouldn't make fun of him. So Joe Biden is somebody that I admire. I think that he's well equipped to be one of America's really, really good presidents.
I do like the optimism coming out of here. What about the criticism? And I'll try and ask this fairly delicately, that perhaps he's not at his absolute best anymore. And it's hard to tell how true that is with the way that the campaign was quite peculiarly done with COVID restrictions and things like that. But there's an idea that although no one really doubts that he's a sort of well-meaning and pleasant person, that perhaps he's not as sharp as he used to be. And obviously the strains of the office must be absolutely enormous.
I've heard that. Every time I hear the comment, including the one from you, it really upsets me. I think it is unfair, it's unkind. You can look at Joe Biden 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. He talks the same way now as he always did. Remember, Joe Biden, as a boy, had to overcome a speech impediment, and he's got some certain characteristics that he still has to work on to overcome that. He sometimes smiles when maybe he shouldn't, but that's part of his speech impediment that he's overcome. So I do not accept the fact that Joe Biden is missing a step at all. You watch him when he comes to make an appearance any place. He doesn't walk, he runs. So I do not accept the fact that Joe Biden has lost a step or two. In fact, I think with his wide-ranging experience, he's probably gained a few steps.
And so it sounds that it's just another coarsening of the discourse in American politics. Is that a worsening problem as well? We get American news only in sort of two formats, either kind of turning on Fox News and finding it quite remarkable compared to the way that, say, the BBC or something reports, or from maybe sort of left of centre comedians who are quite popular over here. I'm thinking about when Jon Stewart used to run The Daily Show. But the way that Americans consume news, especially with all the new kinds of technologies of Twitter and so on, has that also led to the coarsening and the fact that you can just use a sort of insult about that, like Joe Biden losing a step or two, and that becomes a central feature? Is this a coarsening, or is this something else?
Social media has changed politics generally. There's no question about that. But Joe Biden is a person who I believe is someone who understands government as well as anybody that's ever has the opportunity to be president of the United States. His number one attribute, I repeat, is just being a nice person. Everybody knows that about Joe Biden. But there's also part of him that you can't push him. He is no one. You cannot try to bully Joe Biden. He will not take that. So I feel very comfortable that Joe Biden is going to be well equipped to be president, and to show how smart he is, how wise he is. His pick for vice president, I don't know how you could have done better. You could put all the things into a computer and say, what kind of a person should be vice president of the United States? And it would come up Kamala Harris. She's somebody that is young, vivacious, smart. She comes from this most populous state in the nation, California, which is, if it were a country, it'd be the 10th largest country in the world. She was attorney general of that huge state. So I think that Joe Biden is a wise man, and there's no better example of that than Kamala Harris.
And maybe, do you think that with Kamala Harris that the difficulties around whether she says she's going to maybe run again in the future, those kinds of tensions that may be created up at the top of the executive branch there, do you have any evidence of those sorts of, I'm trying to think about the personalities that will be at play and whether that's going to be a central issue? Because in the campaign, she said some very unpleasant things about the president-elect, and now that's sort of water under the bridge. Was that all just politics, or will her sort of hope for the top job perhaps start to overshadow?
I think that that is, when a person is a prize fighter, they have sparring partners, and they get in a ring and they spar with their sparring partners. The sparring partner hits them, he hits them back. When it's all over with, the boss is the guy who's the champ, the one that is telling sparring partner what to do. So I believe that the sparring that they're doing is not doing anything other than making them both better candidates. And I think that what she said months ago, running for president, has all been wiped away with the fact that Joe Biden chose her as president.
I suppose it's always nice to see that.
I'm sorry.
To see that sort of clemency and not holding grudges. I suppose after years in the Senate for you, it must be difficult to let go of all these sorts of grudges, because the saying goes, "Hey, that's politics." But
well, the thing is that I had the good fortune of working in the Senate with, and when I was in the Congress with Jimmy Carter. I was his finance chairman in Nevada when he ran. I worked with Ronald Reagan, both Bushes, Clinton. I worked with all of them, and they were all different. And the fact that they're different means that you handle each of them differently. They have different personalities, and I had certain likes and dislikes with each one of them, as I'm sure they did with me.
When you talk about the need for the sort of bipartisan efforts going on, the fact that even after the Capitol had been stormed, there was 138 congressmen and 8 or 9 senators who still sort of voted against certifying the election. Is that now a difficult problem, that even though Trump will be gone, and we haven't really talked about him much, and maybe you're glad of not having to do that, but even though he may be gone, that sort of lingering difficulty, is that going to be a problem going forward for your otherwise optimistic hope on healing of the nation?
With rare exception, every one of those senators and every House member is being castigated by their local press. There's not a single one of them is getting one positive thing from what they did. It has been a dark part of their career. So I think it's been really a very, very bad thing for our country, what they did. And I think that they are, a number of them, I think the majority of them will be defeated in the next election because of this.
I think that sounds a very hopeful vision for this. One last question on these sorts of Senate wranglings and things like that with Mitch McConnell. What should he do, and what will he do with sort of one full day left? Is there going to be any extra work into this impeachment? Is it going to be confirmed, or do you feel maybe sorry for the position that he's got himself into now, or how do you feel about it?
Well, Mitch McConnell is a wise man. I think one of the things that he's talked about doing, whether he follows through on it or not, remains to be seen. But there are many who say that Mitch McConnell will vote for impeachment because that's the only way to cleanse the Republican Party. That is, get rid of Trump. And time will tell if he's willing to follow through on that. I kind of doubt it, but if he does, there certainly gets rid of Trump forever.
Yes, absolutely. Which I suspect lots of people will be, even if they weren't before the scenes that happened in the Capitol, will be a lot happier about now. I want to try and move on to some other topics about all this, because I think we could probably talk all day about all of it. One thing I found fascinating in doing some research for this was the history of your career in Nevada and some of the work that you did in reforming the various gambling laws and some of the problems there. It may be something that a lot of people watching don't know about or haven't heard about, but some of your I would say adventures even with having to bring some of the criminal elements there to bear. Could you talk a little bit about that? Maybe just introduce
Well, when I was chairman of what was called the Nevada Gaming Commission. And that was a very difficult time in the history of the state of Nevada. FBI did some wiretaps. They found that a number of the casinos, hotels and casinos, were controlled by organized crime figures. I knew they had organized crime in Chicago, but I didn't know they had in Kansas City. But we found Kansas City, after listening to those wiretaps, that they controlled a number of these great big casinos. For example, one of the wiretaps, one of the men running one of the casinos said, "Well, what should I do?" Saying this to the Sevilla brother who's in Kansas City. He said, "Sell the son of a bitch." So he's talking about selling a multi-million dollar hotel, which he did. So we had that was a very, very difficult time for a lot of reasons. I was chairman of the Gaming Commission. They called me on over the FBI wiretaps. They called me Mr. Clean. They didn't like me. And they placed a bomb on my car. My wife was fortunate enough car wasn't running right. Say she's not a mechanic is an understatement, but she just had the intuition that something was wrong. And sure enough, car was wired with a bomb. So they play for keeps, and it took some time to get organized crime out of Nevada. And it was a very tough time for me personally because we had to cover our picture windows in our home and had somebody stay the night with us every night. So it was a very tough time for my family and for me. I can still remember a little 5-year-old boy who's now a grown man practicing lawyer here. Car is out in the driveway where Lander found the bomb, and there's fire trucks there, police cars. My little 5-year-old is looking out the window, which certainly traumatized him. So it was a tough time for me, my family, and for the state of Nevada, but we pulled through it and are better as a result of that.
Must be one of the best compliments, surely, of your whole career to be so disliked by organized criminal elements, being called Mr. Clean. That must be a huge compliment in its way. Nevada now must be completely again transformed, certainly from when you were born. It's now very much a swing state that you have, I think, should take a lot of credit for turning more towards the Democratic side. What is Nevada like now compared to when you were growing up? What is its prospects as a future swing state? And I think as well, you're trying to move its primary further up the sort of schedule as well, because it's more representative than perhaps.
Well, let me tell you about Nevada. Nevada has been a rapidly growing state. It is an oasis of the desert. It is situated directly between Salt Lake City and Los Angeles, and it's really become the mecca for tourism. It is the entertainment capital of the world. Now, we've been hurt with COVID, like everybody else in the world has been hurt with COVID, but Las Vegas is, you ask what has happened over the years. I've worked hard to help the gaming and hotel industry. I've worked with these large corporations. I've worked with foreign governments who have ownership interests in a number of these hotels. Also, one of the things I'm very happy about is that I had the good fortune to try to change Nevada. I wanted Nevada to be a state that was pristine. And as a result of that, I went out of my way to get rid of coal. We don't burn in Nevada anymore. We have one plant that'll go offline in about a year and another one a couple of years. So we got rid of coal. That was not easy to do. But when I was in Congress, I worked hard to get the country to look to renewable energy, and we've done that. Nevada we've created tens of thousands of jobs of building solar facilities. You can drive 20 minutes out of Las Vegas and you can see 2 million solar panels all in one place. When you fly into Las Vegas, it looks like a big body of water, a big lake, but it's nothing but solar panels. And we have now gone to doing much of our energy with solar, with geothermal, and we only have one wind. We don't have right wind. It blows, but not the right way. So we don't have much wind, but we have one nice wind plant, but that's about it. But around the country, we've done so much with moving to renewable energy, and we need to do a lot more, because one of the big problems facing, the most important issue facing the world today, the United States today, is COVID. We have to do something. Trump has been disastrous. His inaction has led to the death of tens of thousands of Americans. And Joe Biden is going to put us on a plane where he's already said that he's going to do, hopes to do 100 million vaccinations in 100 days. And if we don't accomplish that, we're headed in the right direction. We've got to get rid of COVID, not only for the health of humans in this country, but also for the health of our economy. And Joe Biden is moving in that direction.
It's been wonderful.
I'm sorry, please go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's been wonderful to have 45 minutes or so of not having to talk about COVID. It's probably the longest I've gone without talking about it for a while. And you mentioned the problems of the Trump administration in dealing with it. But the Trump administration has also put out some information very recently in the last sort of day or so that points to the fact that it may have come from the Wuhan virology lab and been leaked in some way, shape, or form. I wouldn't ask you to comment on that necessarily, but
I don't mind commenting on it. But here's how I feel about this. I think that it's important we find out where it came from, but that's not the issue. We've got to deal with what we have now, and there's no need to try to steamroll China. I think we should try to work with them, because it's to their advantage that we also find out what happened, where this virus came from, because they suffered from it significantly also.
That may be the case with COVID specifically, but the Communist Party of China has shown, I think, its true face recently, the aggression it's showing towards Hong Kong and towards Taiwan, increasingly in the border with India, the trade embargoes and activity against Australia as well, and all these sorts of various aggressive tactics, not to mention what many would call its mendacity about how COVID got released. Do you think that what do you think America should do with the Chinese Communist Party? Can you continue to
here's how I feel about this. The outgoing Secretary of State, on his way out, stuck a finger in China's eye by reaching out to Taiwan. That was unnecessary. There was no reason for doing that other than to try to embarrass President-elect Biden. So I believe that we need to try to work with China on things that we can work with. It's to their advantage, to our advantage. Things we can't agree on, let's try to do it in a way that is not denigrating to each country and to the world. So there's progress can be made with China. And as I said, the outgoing Secretary of State only did what he did with Taiwan to embarrass Biden. And I think that was so undiplomatic from the person who's supposed to be our diplomat.
But do you not think that in general, the attitude that the maybe developed nations of the world and democracies of the world, the European Union and Britain and America and maybe the West in general, in trying to bring China more into the international order, has just been thrown back in our faces? Do you not think that there's maybe a stronger reaction that's needed?
I think that what Trump has done, which has been adverse to European nations in withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal, was an awful thing that Trump did that. It was a slap in the face to the European nations that signed on to the deal. I think what he has done in that regard has been very bad. I think that we're now going to rejoin with Biden as president. We're going to rejoin the nations that believe in liberty and peace and progress, and one of those countries that we need to work with, try to improve relations, of course, is with China. We also have to. The largest democracy in the world, populated democracy in the world, is India, and we've neglected them these last 4 years. We've done things that have hurt them, not helped them. And I think that Pakistan, we've ignored Pakistan. We have a huge Pakistani American population in America, and we owe it to the people who are Pakistani Americans, if no one else, to try to work things out with a country that is in deep trouble. It's a nuclear nation, and we have to do everything we can to resolve issues between Pakistan and India.
The last perhaps foreign policy question may be a little indulgent from me, but what do you think the state of the special relationship is? There's been a lot of hand-wringing in Britain that Boris Johnson, because of a perceived closeness to Donald Trump, got a very cold shoulder from the incoming Biden administration. But then we hear today that perhaps Britain might be the first country that Joe Biden visits other than Canada. So what is the state of the special relationship, and can Britain expect a friend in Joe Biden?
Well, to have Boris Johnson and Donald Trump trying to work out relations between Great Britain and the United States was a non-starter. They're both a couple of what's the right word? Weird people. And I think that Joe Biden has the understanding that one of the relationships we've had that has paid benefits to us for generations has been the United States and Great Britain. The work together we did to defeat the Nazis is something that history will always record. And we look with great honor at one of Great Britain's leaders, Winston Churchill, who of course had significant ties to America. So I think that the future looks really bright for us with Great Britain.
That's very reassuring. I think it was Churchill's last piece of advice to his cabinet before he stood down was to never be separated from the Americans. So I hope we won't be. The last question, Senator, I'm going to be asking people throughout this whole term is, what's the one big issue that we should be really worried about that nobody really is?
We've talked about COVID today, and we talked about that. But I think the one issue that the younger you get, the more strongly you feel about it. But everybody feels strongly about it. Some, the younger people feel more strongly about it, and that is climate change. We have to recognize that climate change is here. It's not something that's happening in the future. It's here now. Here in America, we've had raging fires in California. We've had windstorms in the Midwest that have been untoward. We have seen weather patterns change. Even here in Nevada, we've had fires. We don't have many trees, but we've had, our rangeland has been burned. And the problem with it is that when the fires are out, invasive species grow, not the original foliage on the ground. So we have all kinds of problems we face with climate change. We're facing it here in America. We're facing it in Great Britain. We're facing it around the world, and we have to address it.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to some questions from our audience who are watching here, if that's all right. The first one here from William Cheng from Oriel College, Oxford. Says, dear Mr. Reid, some people think that your most important political legacy is your encouragement and support for Mr. Obama. But what is in your opinion, most important political legacy?
I think others are going to have to determine that. I'm not very good at picking and choosing. I do know that one of the most rewarding phone calls I ever had in my life was the night Barack Obama was reelected. His staff called my staff and said he's going to give his acceptance speech, and the first person he's going to talk to is you. And he called me and told me, thank you very much. Because of you, I ran for president, was elected. As everybody knows now, that knows anything about politics in around the country, that is that I suggested to a brand new senator that he should run for president. I stunned him when I said that, but I was right and he was wrong. He ran for president and it proved I was right.
The rest, as they say, is history. William also asks, and this may be related to the fact that you're from Nevada. There's been some interesting things recently about the existence of UFOs, that the American government has sort of said there are some things they don't understand. And one piece about something like Area 51 in Nevada and all these sorts of stories. Is that a question that you get asked very often? Do you have
I'm sorry, British brogue has been hard for me to pick up. Go ahead and tell me again.
I apologize. William also asks about something on the existence of UFOs with Area 51 being.
Oh, yes. Okay, sure. I can talk about that. I was in my office and I got a call from someone here in Nevada who said, I got an interesting letter. I'd like you to look at it and tell me what you think about it. So he brought the letter and sent it with a courier. And the letter was from the Defense Intelligence Agency. And the letter said, I am a PhD physicist. I know the history of rockets. I'm expert in rockets. I know where they started. I know where they are now. I know where they're going to be in the future. But what I don't know is these unidentified flying objects, what they're all about. And I want permission to go to this man's name was Bigelow. He owned a big ranch up in Utah, which had all kinds of strange occurrences there. He asked permission to go up there to the ranch. And so we worked that out. So as a result of that, I became interested in these aerial phenomenons. And I read a lot about it. I had briefings from scientists. Bigelow had a seminar at one of his offices. I went there and there were all kinds of academics there and others. And so what people have to understand is these unidentified flying objects, not a dozen people have seen them, not 100, but thousands of people have seen them at different times. There's no question about that. What they are, I don't know, and I don't have a good answer yet. But as a result of this, I decided that we should do something from a scientific basis. I got a call from a woman at the New York Times by the name of Helen Cooper. She said, I want to do a story on unidentified flying objects. I want to interview you because we know you know a lot about this. I said, I'm willing to talk to you. But if you want to talk about little green men, go talk to somebody else. If you want to talk about science, I'm happy to talk to you. And she wrote a very good story in the New York Times, which kind of got all this started. So I went, we met in a secure room in the Capitol. I was the leader at the time, and I called in Senators Stevens and Inouye, one from Alaska, one from Hawaii. They were the senior members of the Defense Appropriations Committee, subcommittee. And they're the ones that determine where all the money was spent, especially the black money, that is, money that didn't show. And I told them, I said, gentlemen, I'm curious and interested about these unidentified flying objects. And I want to spend some money and let's see what they're all about. Let's have scientists look at this. And Ted Stevens said to me, he'd been a pilot in World War II. He said, thank goodness. He said, I've been wondering all my adult life. I was a pilot in World War II, and I was flying, and there was an object off to my right. I couldn't get rid of it. I went up, down, sideways. I couldn't get rid of it. I landed, went to traffic control. I said, what was that? They said, we don't know what you're talking about. So he said he's glad that I asked for the money. They gave us the money. We spent $22 million, taxpayers' money. It was put out to bid, and we had a so-called ATIP program where research was done, finding more about this. What did we find out? The main thing we found out is that there were lots and lots of these occurrences. And that was the most important thing. It wasn't some weird people living in some slum or some ivory tower. They were people who just saw these things and wanted to report about them. And we've made progress. The military, people who were afraid to report them because it would hurt their advancement as officers. But now the military has done the right thing. The Pentagon has said, if pilots see these occurrences, they need to report them. And so the Pentagon's working with us. So progress has been made, and I'm glad I got involved in this. Even today, I'll be in an elevator someplace. They said, "Are you Harry Reid?" I'll say yes, and they'll say, "Man, I'm so glad you've done some work." And they'll usually say flying saucers or something, but they're glad that I've done it. There's tremendous curiosity, not only here in America, but around the world, of these unidentified flying objects.
As they say, maybe the truth is out there. Thank you for that. That was fascinating. One last question, back down to the earth with a bump, from Rush H, who says, will Joe Biden now pack the Supreme Court now the Senate has been won by the Democrats?
Joe Biden, being the person he is, I think he'll work with what he has. I think that would likely set a very bad precedent if each new president would come in and try to doctor the Supreme Court. So I don't see that happening. That's up to Biden and the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. And of course, Pelosi's Judiciary Committee would also have to agree to it. But I don't see any big changes there. I think that we'll just have to work with the court we have. And it appears at this stage that the terrible treatment that Merrick Garland got, who should be on the Supreme Court, but I think Joe Biden reacted the way he should. He's now the Attorney General of the United States. So I feel that we don't need to mess with the court at this stage. And in an effort to do so, the least they would do is set up some kind of a panel to study it more.
Wonderful.
Excuse me.
Thank you so much for that. In an ideal world, we'd all be in our old Victorian buildings and able to give you a raucous round of applause. But in lieu of that, I'll just say on behalf of all of our members, thank you very much indeed. And for those of you who are watching who made it into the meet and greet ballot, the Senator and I will see you on that other chat in just a minute. But Senator, on behalf of the Oxford Union, thank you so very much.
Oxford Union, congratulations for being the organization you are for so long. Thank you.